Today we're going to look at this. This is a gun that somebody threw away. This gun is a scrap gun. This gun is well out of the realms of being financially viable to repair or get back into working order. In today's world, guns are cheap. You can buy a brand new gun for £400 that comes with a 5-year warranty. That is extremely good value for money. However, today I'm going to talk about why maybe we shouldn't be a throwaway society and why maybe we need to look beyond the actual market shelf value of a gun and perhaps think a little bit more about our positions as conscientious carers of the world. There you go, it's a bit deep. Now we're just going to look at a scrappy gun. Come on, let's have a look. So let's have a look at what we're working with first. This is a R Fremantle, a rebounding hammer action non-ejector top lever shotgun. It is very tired, and we're going to go through some of the things that are tired about it today and how much it would cost to get back them together and why that should be good but why nobody does it. First of all, let's sort of have a think about what this is. Well, firstly, it's really pretty. This gun is exceptionally carved. The lines across it are beautiful. I mean, if you just look at those hammers, it's a really nicely put together, not particularly expensive and, not particularly special, I should point out, but still very beautiful gun. This is the gun equivalent of the lady in the nursing home who was once fit, who now just wears a bit of lipstick. It's a good quality gun that looks real nice, but now it's just old. So let's have a look over this to see what's wrong with it and how much it would get to go back in order. Before I do that, let's just say it's not viable, mostly because we now in the UK have a bit of a poverty mindset and we're all used to just buying cheap imported stuff that is, done en masse by people and are all a little bit uncomfortable with paying people high hourly wages to make art to our guns. Some people aren't, and that's a bit of a generalisation, but most people will begrudge the amount of money that it takes a British craftsman to work on this, which is a British gun, because we're all used to paying foreign prices or mass factory prices. And that perhaps is a bit of a sadness there that Britain no longer has a mass big gun factory that sort of can pump this work out at a reasonable price. But I suppose that depends on what you count as reasonable and whether you begrudge another man having more than you or as much as you, which is something that I find strange, but we're not here today to talk about poverty mindset. So here we go. The stock. Well, what is wrong with this stock? Well, firstly, it's got about 130 years worth of abuse. It's marked, it's dented, it has immense oil staining up on the headwork here. We have a crack. The crack goes over where there should be checkering, but is not. Not talking about the metalwork particularly, but this screw has been eaten by somebody. The trigger tang itself did have engraving on at one point, but that engraving is long gone. The oval is proud. Obviously, wood is seasoned, but over 120 years, you're going to get some shrinkage, some warpage, different temperatures and stuff. So this sits proud as well. You have heel and toe plates. Personally, one of my favourite things you can do to any shotgun ever. These are pretty dead too. So where would we go to get this gun sort of back to normal? Well, it could be fixed. It could be fixed up. So let's talk about how much it would cost to get it fixed up. Well, firstly, you're going to need to take this off and soak this head and have the gun refinished and recheckered and re-inlet a little bit because it's probably unrealistic to get this perfect again, but well, hey, that's that. Your heel and toe plates, they need to be polished, recheckered and refitted a little bit as well, and the back will need to be recheckered. What does that cost? Well, let's start with the base cost of this gun is nil because it's absolute trash. Oh, no, you can't call it trash, can you? It's not trash. This gun is only viewed as trash because of its lack of financial value, and that in itself is a despicable way about thinking about things, but a way that we all think about things. The real answer here is to have a new stock made. To have this stock refinished and recheckered and have the heel and toe plates re-engraved and have the whole thing brought back and have the crack repaired, although, it's quite large, so the wiser man would have it restocked. To have this gun restocked to any quality is going to be about £2,000 to £2,500 starting. to have it refinished and redone, you're probably in with the engraving and the heel stuff and re-inletting everything, you're probably in for just under £1,000. However, here's the thing, neither is viable. But anyway, there you go, there's your two options there. £1,000 to have it sort of done and a couple of grand to have it restocked. Obviously, restocking will ruin the zero value anyway, so that's by the by. Trigger guard needs to be refitted, refinished and re-engraved. You're looking at probably a couple of hours work to re-engrave it, and a decent engraver will charge you £75 to £100 an hour. So there's a couple of £100 there. You could get it done quicker and cheaper, potentially, and you know there are people out there who will engrave for about £40–45 an hour, but, well, it's always interesting when you're talking about craftsmen is some people will charge less per hour but take longer, and those guys generally I've found who charge that little bit more will give you a lot of free time. So the time they've spent planning and doing it will be free, and it's just the work time that they're doing it, so if that makes sense. It's the work time you're paying for, not the prep time, and the cheaper guys generally will charge you for the prep time too. That's not always the case, and to be fair, there's a lot of people out there who are very, very reasonable for what they are, but just, there you go. I'm just saying. Action and lock plates is the next place to go, and as you can see, the lock plates are quite pitted. By the time you take them back, there's a couple of bits that you will need welded up just to hide some more significant pits. Not masses, and you could probably get away with it, but at that point you're going to need to start refinishing that, and there is a few areas here where you will want that checkering re-picked out. Of course, then you'll want it rehardened on top. The right lock plate is in worse condition than the left, and your top strap here is buggered. So that will definitely need some love. If you look at this, it's significant pitting that will need welding up, finishing back, and actually bringing back to standard. And obviously here we're talking about doing the best. However, through various back from the brinks, I have learned that trying to do anything on the cheap actually just ends up with a really shocking job. Because when you know what it could look like, that is what is in your mind's eye. And it's nice to do a good job, I think anyway, but a good job costs lots of money. And when I say lots of money, it depends how much engraving work you have done on this gun. There's certain areas around the action body that certainly need touching up, and the trigger guard, and some new pins, and refurbishment of certain bits. And if you look around the fences, the engraving is pretty much gone. Let's call it 1,400 quid's worth of engraving to get this thing back where it needs to be. Maybe 700 if you do it conservatively. Colour hardening thereafter, or at least the case hardening to get it back where it needs to be, and bluing of parts and accessories on this is probably another 600 or so, I would have thought. And after you've done all of that, suddenly you need to be working with the cross pin here. Your joint pin will need to be replaced, because this gun, not only are we talking about aesthetics here, and if we're talking bare minimum, that crack needs to be sorted, and that's quite a lot of rattle, as I'm sure you'll agree. One would need to rejoint this. That would involve a new joint pin here and the potential for actually welding up and increasing the size of the locking underbite. Because, well, guess what? Making a gun out of metal that's 120 years old is less good than a gun than the metal is now, and more importantly, 120 years worth of pulling the trigger and bang, bang, bang. What it does is this. It pushes this away from the face. It pushes the barrels away from the face. There's a lot of pressure in here. And in doing so, it rotates up and around the hinge. So you wear the bit in the bottom and the bit at the front. And as such, those bits after time will need doing up. A full rejoint on something like this, again, dependent on quality and depending on who you take it to, somewhere between 250 and 450, maybe more. I mean, if you took this to, let's say, Purdy's, you would come away a poorer man. That's guaranteed. Anyway, that leads us nicely onto the barrels. I mean, this whole thing just needs a bit of love, doesn't it? Leading onto the barrels. They need to be rebrowned externally, re-etched and rebrowned, but there's also quite a bit of light pitting that might need to be taken off, although this leads us to a bigger and more pertinent issue. This gun is quite pitted inside. I have measured it up, and I reckon that with lapping out, it would still be able to pass proof. However, you'll never be able to put heavy cartridges through it, obviously. It is, tired. Let's put it that way. So when I say pitting, what pitting is where the metal is actually eaten by the rust to create little craters inside, little holes. So when you clean the rust out, the metal has turned to dust. The opportunity here to lap it out and have it done, that is not particularly cheap either. To have it lapped out and redone, well, again, lapping is done in various ways to have it reproofed as well. There's another 400 quid, probably, if it passes proof. So this is the thing, if you do that and then it fails proof, you sort of waste a lot of money for nothing. So this would make you look at other options, perhaps having it sleeved. What sleeving is, well, it's for a different video altogether, but you chop the barrels off just here, and what you make is a monoblock gun. You take that, you chop this here, you mill it out, and you fit 2 new tubes, weld them on, and ta-da, you have your original action block, your chamber here, with new tubes attached. It's essentially how a monoblock gun is built, but what it does a lot of the time is leave you with a very heavy gun, front heavy gun. There are some amazing sleeving jobs out there, However, there's some utter poo as well. So, looking at the expensive side of sleeving versus the cheap side of sleeving, cheap sleeving would leave this gun really nasty, and expensive sleeving of this gun would leave this gun quite nice, but it would no longer be Damascus. So one hopes that it would survive lapping out and reproofing, because to spend 4 odd grand having it sleeved nicely would be a bad thing. When for a few extra grand you could just get new barrels. So if you had a spare sort of 6 or 7 grand, you'd get a new barrel set for it, but they would not be Damascus. So, like I said, one hopes that they would just pass proof as they were, because they are not that bad, not that bad. And what you need is a smooth, polished tube to pass proof. Any rivels, imperfections, or anything like that, and they won't even test it. So, this leads us on to the final bit, the fore end, and this is probably my favourite bit of the lot. So, instead of a buffalo horn tip, you have what looks like a very small piece of acrylic that's been put in there, and you can see the glue attachment in the background, which, to be fair, actually looks kind of cool. And if you look at it from a distance, you'd think, oh, it's like an old patina bit of metal, but then you look at it and it's most definitely not. Underneath, you have a very interesting mixture of screws, from Posi to PH2 to what may have been original but probably isn't. The wood on the fore end also shrinks, so you can see there the screw head is actually coming through. And then if you go over to here and look at the back, this screw, they've decided to put all the way through and put a nut on it. But to avoid, doing any complex inletting of a nice piece of wood in or a nice piece of metal in an escutcheon, what they've done is they've put a big piece of brass and then put some green tape over it. I don't begrudge anybody patch repairing guns. I think patch repairing a gun is better than just condemning it, and that extends the life somewhat. However, well, it's sad, isn't it? So what you need here, by the way, is a new fore-end wood. New fore-end wood is also more money. Look at that beautiful little sort of sundial engraving around there. This gun was a good gun. It certainly was. So where does that leave you? Well, the answer is somewhere between 2 grand and 10 grand worse off. For 2 grand to 10 grand, you could buy a very nice side-by-side hammer action shotgun. Purdy, maybe. A Holland, maybe. Inside of that sort of 10 grand price point, certainly. And that's why guns like this get condemned to the scrap bin. Because, I don't know. Sad, isn't it? It's a very rare thing to find someone who appreciates the history and the sentimental value of a gun enough to spend unintelligent money on it. But as I said at the beginning, is being, shrewd with your money a thing that we should actually be utterly proud of? And you're going, no, I'm going to invest it in a new gun, as opposed to invest it in a piece of British or family history. Look, the baseline is, I don't really know. I am not in a position to be lucky enough to have inherited guns. So I guess I'll never have that pressure put upon me. Who knows? But what I do know is that if I ever won the lottery, I'd buy up every scrap gun that I could, and I'd have the most beautiful collection of guns that nobody else could ever have, because they weren't brave enough to invest that money in guns in the first place. So there you have it. That is a gun that is ready to be retired, or perhaps not. The baseline here is this whole story could have been avoided by, over the last 120 years, somebody spending small amounts of money year by year on it. And a bit like a car, when you drag a car out up until the point when it's basically dead, it costs a fortune. Whereas if you just drop it in for service and checks and little bits here and there, it feels significantly better. Imagine if somebody asked you to pay for a house up front or all at the end instead of month by month. There you go. The sad world that we live in, where somebody would rather have a machine-made alloy piece of than one of these. And it's sad because I suppose I'm part of the problem as well, I guess. As I said, I'm never going to be in a position where I have to make the decision of spending 2 or 3 grand on my grandfather's gun, but I have no doubt that if I was put in that position that I would. Imagine that, making a gun ready for another 120 years. A hand-built British gun that you could have as new for like 4 grand. To me, that's a bargain. However, well, like I said, I get the beauty of it just being a theory. Take care, guys. Goodbye, and we'll see you next time.